Hey, what's up guys? Today we're going to be talking about high bay lighting, especially UFO lights, what you have to look out for, what kind of things and specs to keep an eye on, and generally the best type of light that's going to go into your facility, either high bay UFO lights or high bay linear lights. The focus of this video is going to be more on the UFO side of things because they're by far the most popular for warehouse and hangar and stadium and whatever the use for those lights may be. They're by far more popular than the linear lights. First off, I wanted to talk about the driver. You generally want a driver that's above 0.95 power factor. The power factor is essentially the efficiency rating on the driver. If you have a 0.95 rating, you're only losing about 5% of the efficiency. A lot of I think most reputable drivers on the market now have a 0.95 for the non-dimming, and then if you end up dimming it, it's about a 0.92 or a 0.93. So essentially, if you're going to be dimming the driver, you're going to want to dim it below at least 10 to 20%, because then you're actually getting some kind of net positive out of it, rather than if you dim it by a few percent, which I don't know why you would do that. It's pointless to get a dimming driver or a dimming version of the light at that point. Anyways, moving on, you want to keep track of the efficiency rating on these UFO lights. Especially the lumens per watt. There's a common misrepresentation of dimming or of specs online. Especially, a lot of retailers will specify the LED efficiency rather than the overall efficiency once the fixture is fully put together and then tested. So, for example, our LEDs inside of our UFO lights are Philips Lumileds 3032Ds, which at 5000 Kelvin are going to be around 163 lumens per watt. That's never going to be what you're actually getting when the light fixture is installed and actually operating together with the driver. Those specs are listed as the most optimal specs possible. They're tested for 20 milliseconds in the factory, and that's essentially how they're binned. So when you're looking at those specs, it might seem like, oh my god, this is so efficient. In reality, you're getting about 135 to 140 lumens per watt with our lights, because there's the 5% net loss from the drivers, because there's no drivers on the market that are 100% power factor efficient, and if there are, they're exorbitantly expensive and probably fairly large. Essentially, there's going to be another layer of lumen loss or lumen deprecation that happens through the diffuser, through the lifetime of the fixture. LEDs get less efficient as they go on throughout their lifetime. That's why we go with the DLC premium mark, which guarantees that our fixtures are going to be efficient 90% or more at the end of their lifetime. Essentially, we test it to make sure that our lumen deprecation and lumen loss is at a minimal, and when the chips get binned, they're binned at a typical lumen rating of 163 lumens per watt. But in reality, you're getting about 135 to 145 lumens per watt with our fixtures, which is basically the best you can get on the market, unless you're paying exorbitant amounts for better LED chips. In that case, it's no longer efficient to buy really expensive fixtures, because you're just losing money up front, and in a few years there could be better LEDs that come out that are way cheaper, and then you're better off than buying those fixtures. Another thing to look for, especially in the US, you want the UL or ETL listed mark. Some states require UL only. Some municipalities, I guess there's some lobbying going on by the UL guys versus the ETL guys. Essentially, UL creates the standards and tests for them, and then ETL just tests for those existing standards to make sure a driver or a light fixture is certified or a driver is certified for those standards. There's literally no difference between UL and ETL, except UL has an overall more widespread and more trusted brand, as you would call it. We all of our fixtures are UL listed and also DLC premium listed, which I talked about in the past. Generally, with UFO lights, you don't, if you're getting them overseas and they're only CE rated or there's no UL mark, I wouldn't recommend installing them because they don't pass. They won't. You probably won't pass inspection, to be honest, depending on how strict your inspector is and how well they check those lights. Moving on, I wanted to talk about the color temperature of the UFO high bay lights or any kind of lights and what effect it has on efficiency. Essentially, you want to be for commercial and warehousing, you don't really need to worry about color temperature, except that you want it to be between 45 and 5500 Kelvin. That's when LEDs are the most efficient, and that's generally what you want to stick with, because if you go into those extreme yellow light, such as 2700 or 3000 Kelvin, you're losing about 10% to 20% lumen efficiency up front. So you're essentially throwing money in the garbage just because you want a warmer light. And in warehouses, typically the boxes are brown, or just there's bland colors. You're not trying to run a design studio out of a warehouse where you need perfect colors and a perfect look to your designer warehouse, so to speak. You generally want to be in 5000 Kelvin. That is what almost all UFO and high bay lights are sold at, and that's when they're the most efficient and where you get the best performance overall. Next, we're moving on to the beam angle. Generally, almost everybody gets 120 degree beam angle unless their high bays are really high up and they need more more luminous flux per square foot. At that point, they either move down to 90 or 60 degree beam angle, which just a narrower, brighter light. For most applications from 14 to 25 to even 30 feet, 120 degrees is just fine. You wanna generally spread the light and have each of the lights overlap each other at least by a bit, so there's an even lighting across your whole warehouse. One thing to look out for is placing multiple lights. If you just have one light source, let's say it's a small warehouse, if you just have one light source, you're going to cast a lot of shadows, so you'd want at least 2 to 3 lights to cast as little shadows as possible, especially if you're working on something like a car garage or a truck garage that's fairly high up. If you're installing those, you really want to have good lighting coverage all over, so you're not casting shadows everywhere. And finally, we're going to talk about the total lumens you might or might not need. Generally, for low, let's say 10 to 20 foot high warehouses that don't really require, that aren't like special cases where you need just extremely bright light, you want to be between 100 and 150 watts on the high bays if they're running at 135 lumens per watt, because if you place a 240 watt UFO only 14 feet or 11 feet up, it's just going to hurt your eyes if you look up at it. They're really extremely bright, because at 240 watts you're essentially looking at 32,500 lumens with our lighting, and don't recommend you look. It's like the solar eclipse. Get some eclipse glasses if you're going to be looking at that. Generally, you want to decrease light pollution and still have a good coverage area of your warehouse or workspace. I would say move up to 200 or 240 watts past 25 to 30 feet, because otherwise it's a little bit of overkill and you're just, again, throwing money to waste. Anyways, if you guys are interested in our high bay lights you can check out the website here, and there's also going to be a link in the description. If you need to give us a call, you can always give us a call at 1-800-912-9216. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.